everyone, it's Chris here with Tabletops and Tentacles, and yes, it's the classic hands down pose. Ooh. I thought I'd do a new series of videos on here where essentially I'm just gonna sit and read a zine or a game and kind of give my thoughts on it, and not necessarily a review so much as just sort of chill out and read a game with you guys. I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be a little bit of a casual hangout, longer videos than I usually make as well. I thought that since it's February now, and that means Zine Month and Zine Quest, I would focus on either some indie zines that were in my collection that I've never browsed through, or a few of my favorites, or just whatever one I randomly pick out of the pile of zines on my shelf. Tonight we're going to start with Dead Air, a game about radioactivity. So I backed this one on Kickstarter a while ago. I'm not sure exactly when it came out. Game tells you how to make your radio station as successful as possible after a nuclear attack. This is from Sleepy Sparrow Games and Blackwell Games. Dead Air was written and designed by Fiona Ruthven, with significant contributions from Sadie Woods and invaluable guidance from Anna Blackwell. I love Anna Blackwell's stuff, generally speaking. I'm pretty sure that their involvement with this and my sort of enjoyment of ephemera and overall radio adjacent things made me immediately interested in this game. It's also a solo game with a little bit of a journaling vibe to it, which I've always enjoyed, which I'm generally a big fan of. So this is copyrighted to 2023. And this is kind of an interesting book. As you're browsing through it, it actually introduces it here, but it has a mix of game mechanic pages that are a lot clearer, just text for the most part, and then they have like sort of in-world content sort of filling out the vibe, but also giving you some ideas and some different tables and a few things. I really love the look of this book. I think it's eclectic and clean and really unique looking and really well done. If anything, I would say my only minor quibble about it is I think it would have had a little bit of a more accurate vibe if it had been on matte or uncoated paper instead, but that's purely just the dumbest nitpick. So in these series of videos, I'm basically just going to read the book and make comments on it as I go. Maybe make notes for my own games or what I'm going to do when I play this game. So this is from DEPRO, the Department of Broadcast. Notice of summons. To the persons named in the attached summons from Strathclyde Regional Command Dispatch Officer. Subject: Activation of Broadcast Continuity Act 1983. To whom it may concern, you are hereby ordered to report to your regional command per your registration as a broadcast engineer, dated 16/7/83, through a workplace training program at your place of work, Greenock Ice Rink. This is a direct order and you must attend. Due to the official state of heightened risk, certificates of exemption are no longer valid. You may not bring family members or loved ones to your local command. You may pack one small case of clothing and personal effects. You must pack any medicines noted in your medical report. In order to reduce the risk of public disorder, you may not inform anyone about this summons. By accepting this summons, you acknowledge its receipt. Once you've signed it, return to the issuing officer along with your photo ID and regional command card. The issuing officer has been ordered to escort you to the regional command and will wait up to 10 minutes from your receipt of this summons. Love this. Gives you kind of the vibe, what you're doing, where you are, and that You work at an ice rink and apparently also need to run a radio station. Hello and welcome to Dead Air. I'm your host Fiona, and I'll be with you right through to the end. This book is laid out as a collection of found documents. You'll come across newspaper clippings, 15th generation photocopies, and other weird miscellanea. Pages that look like this one are out of character, OOC, and will deal with the actual mechanics of playing the game. Everything in OOC pages can be trusted, but every other page is totally subjective. It's up to you if you want to follow. For example, 1950s military guidance over I should have read that better. It's up to you if you want to follow, for example, 1950s military guidance over 1980s civil defense paperwork. Dead Air is an exercise in doing the best you can with very limited resources. A note on tone. Dead Air is set in a world devastated by man's inhumanity to man. In the standard scenario, this is a post-nuclear hellscape with all the ugly realities that implies. The tone of this book is darkly humorous, and that is the intended way to play the game, but you should tailor the tone of your broadcast to your own comfort level. If you do want to play in a world devastated by, one really big angry cat, that's your business, and it's just as a correct way to play as the intended way. This game is never edgy or hateful, and if you think that's a bad thing, you should give this game to someone nicer. A note on radio. You do not need to know anything about radio to play this game. Everything technical that actually matters to the playing experience is explained in layman's terms. Recording your programs in some way is the intended experience, but the game is written to facilitate a more traditional journaling style too. So this reminds me of one of the other games I've played on my podcast Die Alone, where you are a long-haul trucker calling payphones and leaving recordings in a sort of strange, vaguely eldritch apocalypse. Setting up. You will need a deck of cards and a pen and paper to play. Ideally, you'll also want a way to record your program. Your mobile phone's voice note feature is almost definitely good enough to handle this. There are a couple of additional things that will make the experience a bit simpler: a copy of the map and band plan, and a forum to track your remit progress. There are photocopyable examples of these at the end of the book, or you can draw them yourself pretty simply. There is a 2-page flowchart towards the end of the book, which you might find useful as a quick reference guide. How you set up your play area is up to you, of course, but you'll probably want an area for your equipment cards, a stockpile area for your resources, sticky notes or bookmarks for your most beloved tables and references, a pencil and rubber, I assume they mean eraser, an attitude of grim determination, and a radiation detecting instrument capable of gamma and neutron detection. That one's optional. If I was cool, I would take this deck of Provision brand playing cards and open it and shuffle it in some impressive and fancy manner, but I am not cool, so I am just going to shuffle it in a sloppy, not very good at shuffling manner. I like these cards. They've got a nice retro vintage vibe to them while still being interesting. I don't know if I've ever actually used these cards. That's good enough for this. I'm not really playing, so I don't need a amazing shuffle. I just want some cards. Now, the in-world stuff, I probably won't read all of this. I'll just kind of lay it out so you can kind of see it. I like the vibe of these. They give you some interesting information. Like this one says, remember, alert, acknowledge, hold fast. And they've changed it to the horror. And I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but the ephemera, the pen drawing on this looks so accurate to what it would look like if somebody actually drew on a piece of glossy paper. So I can only assume that that's how this was done. It's impressive if it was done digitally. Visiting Strathclyde, a traveler's view of the west of Scotland. So this has a couple of in-world advertisements, including only 2-day sailing from Dumbarton, or one from, oh gosh, I'm going to butcher these and I apologize, Walk ahead, visit Colonsay to see the sheep. untouched by the horror of war, free from sin, surprising and mysterious. Love the little in-world stuff in this. The Scott McFerry's one's hilarious. At first glance, the lands of Strathclyde may strike the traveler as little different from those which surround it. A toxic feudal landscape pockmarked by the scars of the last war, which has little to offer in the way of hospitality or entertainment. But pull back on the layer of blackened, dead scum, and a more nuanced view is possible. That of a nation-state which has persevered through the long years since the bombs, a people filled with determination and not a small amount of radioactivity, and a wealth of natural wonders untouched by the creeping blackness which has claimed so much of similar regions. I love the vaguely tongue-in-cheek black humor Fallout vibe of this book. Strathclyde as we know it has had its origins in the deep and murky past of the pre-war world. It began as a kingdom controlling the lands around the River Clyde, with its capital in Auckland or modern-day Dumbarton Rock. It became part of the Kingdom of Scotland, then the United Kingdom, and finally a council area, which we may now call a duchy or administrative subdivision. Modern Strathclyde owes its existence to its council area, which was designated as a regional control. This is what the pre-war national government called areas of the country which would operate as sovereign nations should the central government be destroyed in a nuclear war. We all know how that went. Similar examples of this origin story can be seen in Northumberland and Continuity Devon. Destinations in Strathclyde. Ayr. The center of the mining industry in Strathclyde, Ayr is a working town with probably the worst air quality anywhere in the world. Fallout from the nearby Prestwick crater does not help the matter. Best avoided unless strictly necessary. The only reason to visit is to board a ship to leave, possibly to Arran or the south. Dumbarton Rock. The ancient capital perched on a volcanic plug holds two main attractions, unparalleled views and unparalleled safety, both afforded by the 70-meter basalt cliffs surrounding the settlement. Control over the rock is hotly contested, and at the time of publication, the rock is held by a group of warmongering cannibals known as the Sons of the Rock. Caution is advised for visitors, BYOB. I love the way this is written. It's in-world, but still totally gives you this world building that's kind of tasty. Glasgow, one of the largest cities in Scotland, now a smoldering moonscape, best avoided by all but the hardiest. Helensburgh, absent. Inverary. Come for the game, stay for my awful pronunciation. A veritable fortress of a town which serves as the local seat of government, the court and prison were famous before the war and are best experienced from outside of the bars. Inverary is a good place to meet crofters and hunters who come to town on occasion for trade. Iona, once the spiritual home of the popular pre-war religion Christianity, now the home of extremely angry monks with seemingly limitless supply of ammunition and fury. Best avoided. Islay. This beautiful island is well worth the challenging voyage. Now semi-autonomous, the island produces legendary whiskey for fuel, medicine, and most importantly, drinking. Be sure to see Finlagan, the ancient home of the Lord of the Isles, now revived as a regional stronghold. Neighboring Jura is also worth a visit, but take heed of reports that Slate Island pirates may have a foothold on the island. Kilmarnock. Unchanged, avoid. Loch Lomond, a massive and extremely beautiful body of reasonably clean water. The region around Ballockit to the south is the subject of a local legend regarding the Beast, a thing which lives in the water. At the very top of the loch sits Drover's Fort, a boundary with the often lawless region to the north. Loch Lomond boasts an impressive number of islands, many of which are inhabited, often by humans. Oban. Once known as the gateway to the Isles, this town has it all. The largest safe port in the west of Scotland, prevailing westerlies which keep the air clean, and a thriving fishing hunting economy. If you can ingratiate yourself with the local militia, you may even be lucky enough to visit the imposing Fort McCaig, which dominates the town and offers weekly gladiatorial fights, a must-see. Rothesay, de facto capital of the Isle of Bute, Rothesay sustained surprisingly little damage during the war. Visit for the charming pre-war architecture, stay for the uncontaminated drinking water. Note that transport to and from Butte is dependent on fuel supplies and pirate activity. Advice for travelers. Much of the advice for this region is the same any wise traveler would heed anywhere. Keep your valuables secure, beware the drinking water, take your iodine. There are, however, a few points worth noting before you embark for Strathclyde. Government. The government of Strathclyde is complex and bureaucratic. Trying to understand their machinations is a wasted effort for the newcomer. Instead, just accept whatever forms you were given and pay whatever fines, bribes, may come your way. People. The people of Strathclyde are very diverse, ethnically, religiously, socially, and in attitude towards the consumption of human meat. Do not expect to meet only kilted whiskey drinkers, although you will. Respecting local customs means pronouncing loch, not lock, and avoiding risky topics like football or the English. Safety. Strathclyde is no more dangerous than comparable regions. Special attention should be paid to wolf awareness and to sideways rain. So one thing about this book I've noticed as I'm going is that it's all justified, which I normally don't mind. It looks nice until you get into like some of these areas with the larger font use where you have like 3 words spread out over the column and it gives these weird spaces, which also for me really throws me off when I'm reading them aloud. But I love the way this is written. It's wry and clever. So resources are how you use the cards in the game and sort of the major mechanic of this. People. All spades, regardless of card value, are one person. People cards can be used in 3 ways. You can assign them to staff, pieces of equipment. You can assign them to staff pieces of equipment in your station by putting the card sideways on top of the equipment card to show this. You can assign them as runners, who are members of station staff who scour the wastelands in search of useful supplies. To do this, place them aside during the scavenging round. At the start of the next turn, they come back to your station with what they found. Finally, you can use people cards as a caller or a guest to bring a news item to your desk. To do this, burn the card and draw from the news contexts table. Draw 3 cards and see what you get. You can pick from either of the tables depending on which you prefer. Don't forget to shuffle these 3 cards back into the deck. So far my only complaint about this, first of all, I like that it sounds like this is a little bit of a base building thing going on as well. I do think it makes it a little more difficult to play because there aren't page numbers on this and there's no references on it either. Power. All hearts, regardless of card value, are 1 power. Power cards can be used in 3 ways. Power can be used to power equipment by placing the appropriate number of power cards sideways on the equipment. Cards powering equipment are not burned at the end of a turn, and you can retrieve them as later turns to use as you see fit. It may help to think of it as charging a battery. Power can be used to increase your transmitter power. Put the power cards in your band plan and increase your transmitter power by 1 for each power card. These are not burned at the end of the turn. They work just like power for an equipment. It might help to think of the transmitter as an invisible equipment card you always have. To power your transmitter for broadcast, simply burn 1 power card back into the deck every turn. If you do not do this, you cannot transmit that turn. To burn a card, shuffle it back into the deck. So this is referencing mechanics and aspects of the game like your transmitter that we haven't run into in the rules yet, so that's a little confusing, but not too bad. Equipment. Every equipment card is different depending on card value. Check the technology table to see what your card represents. Equipment cards have requirements for power and people and do not function if these requirements are not met. Problems. pronounced in italics, represents the many things which go wrong when running a radio station in a nuclear wasteland. Each problem is different depending on card values, so check the problems section to see what horror awaits. Some problems are critical, which require a draw from a second table. Go to the table indicated and draw a card from the top of the deck to see which greater horror awaits. A few problems are catastrophic, which represents something with game-ending potential occurring. If you're lucky enough to draw one of these, the exact nature of the catastrophe is left to your imagination, but the outcome should be a game over. Here are some examples. Catastrophic equipment failure. The fuel pellet shielding in your dielectric generator failed, fatally dosing everybody in the station. Catastrophic people failure. A guest eats and murders you live on air, in that order. Catastrophic news failure. Draw a news story and determine how that story led to your downfall. Or catastrophic powers that be failure. The government no longer exists. Play Swan Lake. If you really don't want the game to end, you could instead create a situation in which it's no longer possible to fulfill your remit. Remember, the wasteland is unfair, and losing is fun. Broadcast remit. Dead Air is played over 10 turns. These turns represent the 10 weeks for which the powers that be have granted you a broadcast license. At the end of 10 turns, your license will be up for review, assuming the station still exists and the staff are still alive or conscious. In exchange for the privilege of broadcasting over the wastes, the powers that be have issued you with a remit to fulfill. Your remit consists of 3 core elements. The primary remit items, issued at the start of your license, which must be delivered to all settlements in your broadcast region. The secondary remit item, issued 6 weeks into your license, which must be delivered to all settlements in your broadcast region only once they have heard all 3 primary items, and a broadcast news requirement. You must broadcast at least 5 items of news over the license period. So it's interesting that there must be a mapping aspect to this of what your broadcast area covers as well. Yeah, it looks like that's sort of covered here in the back. To find your primary remit items, draw 3 cards and refer to the remit definition table. Take note of the results. Think about what your primary remit item infers about the world you're speaking to. For example, if your remit is to denounce the separatists, who are they? What does the existence of a separatist movement say about the powers that be? How do your 3 remit items interact with each other? Does one item support or contradict another? Why? You should have a general idea about what your remit means before you begin your first program, but not too concrete of an idea. The meaning might evolve and change as the game goes on. To borrow from Void 1680 AM by Ken Lowry, the best way to play is to find a story which compels you rather than one which satisfies. The world of Dead Air is horrific, unfair, and funny in a laugh or you'll cry way. If your remit seems too easy, try interpreting one of your items as uncharitably as you can. Your secondary remit items is found the same way as the first, but you only draw 1 card, and only once you reach week 6. Additionally, you can only broadcast your secondary item to settlements which have already heard all 3 of your primary items. If you break this rule, you are in violation of your remit and must draw 3 problems immediately. You can interpret the secondary item in the same way as the primary item with 1 proviso. It must directly contradict at least part of your primary remit items. For example, if we drew Denounce the Separatists in our primary items, and the new Peaceful Organization is not a cult for our secondary item, maybe we could say that the new Peaceful Organization is the Separatists. Your aim here is to make your job as difficult as possible. You've committed to the bit for 6 consecutive weeks, and now you need to tell your listeners the one thing that will make you sound like a goon. It is important to note that the secondary item does not cancel out any of your primary items. You still need to broadcast all 3 primary items to every settlement. If that means telling the people of New Molgoy that they must lie on the ground and shelter in place while also fleeing for their lives in the same sentence, so be it. Your news items are found on the news context table, which are explained in the resources section. You must broadcast a minimum of 5 news items over 10 weeks, but these can be split up however you like. News items can be a very powerful tool for building an evolving narrative between programs. If a caller one week tells you that the entire town got up and walked into the sea, you can bet listeners are going to want to hear what happened to them next week. You should track your remit as you play through the game. Your performance will be judged at the end of turn 10 based on how well you fulfilled it. You can do this any way you like, however, a photocopyable table is included in the appendix. It's got a little ad for the Green Heart Hotel. So let's pop over here. So that's the program report, which is the remit that they are referring to there. So you can track your 3 primary remits and your secondary remit. Let's see if we can find the remit table. There is certainly some options here, but I'm not... here we go, the remit tables. So let's go ahead and draw a couple of cards here. I won't go through every single thing on every single one of these tables. We got the Jack of Hearts. So my first is everything is fine. The King of Spades. A message of warning in the face of an invasion. And finally, the Six of Spades. Denial that any bombs ever fell. Okay, interesting. So let's pretend like we're on week whatever it was, and we'll draw our secondary remit as well. I don't want another spade. Let's draw from the middle of the deck here. My poor shuffling is biting me in the ass. 6 of diamonds. Denial that black zones exist. Nice. So I like this. I like how much your game would change based off of those 3, despite having, only so many different options that you can land on there. Turn structure. Turns in Dead Air are split into 3 rounds: the scavenging round, the broadcast round, and problems. The scavenging round. If this is your first turn, draw 3 power and 4 people cards. Then draw 3 random cards from the top of your deck. So you do start with a sort of starting deck of cards. Otherwise, begin by bringing your runners back into the station if you sent any out last turn, and drawing a card from the deck for each of them. Inspect what your runners have brought back from the wasteland. If there are people or power cards, put them in your stockpile. If there is any technology, check the technology pages to see what you found, and if there are any problems, put them aside for later. Now assign your resources for the turn. This could mean assigning staff or power to equipment, or burning people cards to use as guests or callers for news items. You should also assign some staff as runners to bring back resources for next week. Put these cards aside to represent their journey out into the hell-blasted deathscape of Strathclyde. Finally, decide if you're going to broadcast this week. Burn 1 power card to power the transmitter and go on air. There are steep penalties for failing to broadcast, so it might be worth drawing power from some equipment if you're running low. The broadcast round. This is the creative element of the game. There are a few mechanics in place to guide you here. You can only broadcast 3 items per turn. This could be 3 remit items, 2 remit items, and a news item, or any mixture you like. You can broadcast fewer than 3 items if you want to, but you'll probably want to use all 3 every turn. When you broadcast the messages, tick the appropriate boxes on your remit tracking form. There is a photocopyable template at the end of the book. Other than that, what you do is up to you. The suggested way to play is to write and record a short script covering all of your items. You should record this using whatever equipment is available to you. Remember, the world has been devastated by nuclear hellfire. You don't need to have access to professional studio equipment. Thank God. Each program should be 3 to 10 minutes long, but go for as long as it feels right to you. The example turn section gives you more guidance about programming with an example script. And then finally, problems. At the end of every turn, deal with your problems. If you drew any problem cards at the start of the turn, look them up on the problem table now. It is important to remember to do this at the end of the turn. Some problems are retroactive to simulate things going wrong during your broadcast. For example, you may find out after interviewing a guest that she lied about every single thing she told you. Coping with these problems is a huge part of live radio, and how you cope is the real test of a producer. If this is the end of your 5th turn, draw your secondary remit item now in preparation for turn 6. Some more character here. Your broadcast map. The map is divided into a 10 by 10 grid. Settlements are represented by building symbols, while transmitters are represented by radio mast icons. Each transmitter represents a different station. In the default scenario, your station is located at G6 on the Isle of Bute. The broadcast footprint is the area in which your station can be heard. Your broadcast footprint extends out from your transmitter 1 grid square in every direction for every point of broadcast power. For example, if your broadcast power is 2, your footprint extends 2 squares out from the transmitter, creating a square of 5 by 5. Some areas of the map are shaded. Those are black zones, areas in which the residual radiation from fallout is so extreme that electronic equipment is often damaged or unreliable. Your broadcast is still sent into those areas, but there's a chance that the listeners in a black broadcast is still sent... There's a chance the listeners in a black zone will not hear it because their equipment is cooked. When you broadcast to a settlement in a black zone, draw a card from the top of the deck. If your card is black, your broadcast was heard. If it's red, nobody heard you and you'll need to try again. In this example, Bloodmouth Radio would need to draw a card from the top of the deck to see if they were heard in Settlement B. Settlement C exists in an area of overlap, so survivors there can pick up both stations, and nobody can be heard in Settlement D, and frankly, they're glad of it. This is so great, I love it. The term broadcast comes from the language of farming. It originally meant to cast seeds broadly across a field. It's important to remember that your broadcasts work this way. They are indiscriminate. You cannot target your broadcasts at one settlement in a footprint area and miss out others. Every valid settlement in your footprint area will hear you. Bear this in mind if you encounter a situation where you cannot let one town hear what you are telling another. For example, if you broadcast your secondary remit message to a settlement which has not heard all 3 of your primary remit items, you're in violation of your remit and will suffer consequences. So that's interesting that you kind of like track it, and it looks like it has different settings for different locations, so you can kind of experience a different game based off of what map you're using as well. An example turn. At the start of the game, producer Sadie draws 3 cards to find her primary remit items. She draws an Ace of Spades, a Queen of Clubs, and a 7 of Diamonds. This gives her a message of hope in the face of an ongoing event, the news that it is coming, and a warning that fallout is spreading, as primary remit items. She takes a few moments to think about what those mean about the world and how to bring them together. She decides that the ongoing event is that the English are marching north in search of drinking water and that they're bringing it with them. She decides to leave what it is vague for now, deciding that it will become clear once the game progresses. She decides that the warning that fallout is spreading should be unrelated to the other 2 items, at least for now. Sadie shuffles the 3 cards back into the deck and begins her first turn. It's turn 1, so Sadie draws 3 power and 4 people cards, then draws 3 cards from the top. She draws a 5 of diamonds, a king of clubs, and an 8 of spades. She puts the diamond aside for the problems round, puts the spade in her stockpile with her other 4 people cards, and looks up the club on the technology table. Turns out the king represents an audio compressor, which effectively boosts her broadcast power by 1. Now she allocates her resources for the turn. She has 3 power, 5 staff, and the compressor. She decides to staff the compressor this turn, so she places a person card on it. She sends 3 runners out to bring back resources for the next turn, and she has 1 person card left, so she decides she may as well draw a news story this turn to count towards her news remit. Sadie burns the person card and draws 3 from the top of the deck on the news table. The result is a 6, a queen, and a 2. Either a disgusted story about a rival station appearing from the wilderness, or a story about a pathetic ration giving. The second one seems a bit abstract, so Sadie decides to go with the first one. That's it for resources, but before Sadie broadcasts, she checks the map and band plan to see who she's talking to. She has a broadcast power of 2 with the compressor running, and she marks the band plan accordingly. Her station is more powerful than her neighbors now, so she doesn't need to worry about interference. A broadcast power of 2 means she reaches out 2 squares from the transmitter. She'll be heard in A, B, and D. B is in a black zone, so she'll have to check at the end to see if anyone picked her up. That's that. So Sadie burns a power card to spin up the transmitter and broadcast. Sadie is in the Ruins, Week 1 broadcast. Producer, Sadie the Insatiable. Theme song. Announce. You are listening to Sadie is in the Ruins on Strathclyde Radio. SFX. Horror Screaming. Only on Channel 4. Hello, survivors, and thanks for tuning in. Special greetings go out to survivors in Region B work camps who are legally compelled to tune in. I hope these sacks of rubble get a little lighter. I'm going to start that over. Hello, survivors, and thanks for tuning in. Special greetings go out to the survivors in Region B work camps who are legally compelled to tune in. I hope those sacks of rubble get a little lighter. This week's headline news. The dreaded English are marching north once again. Sources close to the Cessnock horde claim that they are mega thirsty, and that England looks even worse than before the bombs. A spokesthing for the government of Strathclyde told our reporters that the English will never make it to Loch Lomond, and even if they did, drinking it would probably kill them. Some sound effects. These claims are refuted by Cessnock foreign policy expert Bloodmouth McCaganey, who seems certain that the English have it buried under their command, and that they are bringing it to Strathclyde to wreak havoc. When questioned about what it is, McCaganey started crying and making a sort of wet, gurgling noise. Finally this week, I noticed that some balking idiots from the hated Fife have set up a very stupid radio station in the wilderness. They are broadcasting which can only be described as toilet sounds. It's got a Highlander control unit. Don't forget, if you hike the bastard up a mountain, you will break your back. If you don't get struck by lightning. Nice. Happy with the horrors she just thrust upon the listening public, Sadie updates her remit table to reflect her progress. First of all, did Settlement B hear the program? She draws a card, a 2 of spades, so it was a success. She crosses off primary remit items 1 and 2 for settlements A, B, and D, then puts the first check mark beside her news remit for her story about the toilet station. Time to deal with her problem now. She looks up the 5 of diamonds. All rival stations gain 1 power. That's not so bad, at least. She marks the band plan accordingly, so she remembers this upset for next turn. She breathes deeply and dives into turn 2, ready for whatever fresh nightmares her runners bring back. And then we got our remit tables. We put a bookmark there at some point here, although that is something you only need the 1 time, and then again at turn 5. We've got some guidelines for if your radio has been cut off. We've got news broadcast context. So let's draw for this one. Let me reshuffle these cards here. So there's 2 separate tables you can pull from. There's the tone subject event table or the adjective noun verb table. First off, we have a comical, mythical, attacked by other. So something comical and mythical is attacked by other. Or our option is an absent, oops, that's not even a card. An absent ruin screaming. I like screaming coming from absent ruin, so we'll roll with that one. And we've got a picture of the map in a expanded color form. A couple of notes here. I like the population marked down to 50 to 100K-ish. The key industries are now violence, coal mining, rebuilding, keeping the English out, and tourism. We've got Godric Boyd & Co., approved stockist of technical equipment. So this is the equipment chart here. So you pull a card out to see what you get. Oh my gosh, why do I have all these in here? I got a 2. So they found a treadmill. You can exchange 1 staff for 1 power and can only be used once per turn. That's great, I love that. And then some of the stuff has a power cost on it or a staff cost if you want to be able to use it. But this one is apparently optional, so you don't have to add them to it. A little more flav there. All staff notice, broadcast continuity strategy, orthogonal outcomes. So this kind of gives you an idea of the different bases. And then here is our problems table, which is a little hard to read with the way that they did it. It's a little blurry, but I have bad eyes as well. It says to draw a card, refer to the problems table below, observe the result. If you need to refer to a second table, do so and note the result in your workbook. So we pulled a queen, which gives us a critical failure. Ooh, news problem table. So that is an end of game problem, and we go to the news table to see what triggered that critical problem. Another option is a 3, which is also a critical failure with people related. Wow, there's a lot of problems that are not great, but also wasps. So, you know, there's that. We also have a technology critical problem reference, which can give us something like, your generators give up and you cannot broadcast during the next turn. Ooh, that's brutal. That one's hard to read as well, but not too bad. We got problems that be problems, or powers that be problems, such as the red phone no longer has a dial tone. The powers that be need the remit sooner than expected. You have 1 less turn. Nice. News critical failures, such as king. The last piece of news you reported was wrong in the worst imaginable way. That's great. We've got critical people problems. Oh, okay, so it's catastrophic critical failure that are the end of game ones. A critical failure just means you roll on the relative chart, and then if you end up with an ace, you get a catastrophic critical failure. So in this case, we got one of your staff was a spy from a rival station. Lose 1 staff and 1 item of unstaffed technology. That's cool. I like the idea that you kind of lay these out as you're playing and apply power and staff to them, and that there are some things that can take away your equipment. That's pretty cool. I love the taped coin and then the thumbprint in blood. These are radio tips from Fiona. If you can, sit up straight and speak from your lungs.
If you can find a pair, stick a pair of cans over your lungs to monitor your recording. Keep your beautiful face a constant distance away from the microphone. About 10 centimeters is a good starting place. Use a pop shield to keep your plosives from popping. You can make one from a coat hanger and a pair of your mum's tights, I asked her. If you can't scrounge up a pop shield, try facing the microphone at an angle so the air leaving your kissable lips doesn't hit it directly. You could also try putting a finger to your lips as though you're telling your excited cousins to be quiet during a reading of a will. That splits the air so it shouldn't pop. Have a glass of clean water nearby to keep your golden voice golden. Dirty water will not do. I did not drink enough water while we did this. I should have read these tips earlier, Fiona. Remember that your listeners are individuals, and from their perspective, it's just you too. Broad statements like, "Hello, Strathclyde," or "What's up, rat eaters," are fine. But when delivering important information, address it to the individual. You must escape the dust, not people downwind. Whatever style of programming you're making, there's a few constants that transcend genre. The listener needs to know who you are, what the station is, and why they should be listening. Do not encourage survivors to remember times before the bomb. I cannot stress this one enough. It's a total mood killer. If you're lucky enough to have a digital audio workstation too, check you out. Try using music to add texture to your programming. Beds are low-volume tracks you play under your awfully bony voice. Remember that you're the star of the show, though. When in doubt, turn the bed down. Jingles can be used to grab attention or to punctuate programming, but don't go overboard. Or do. It's your show. Although Depbro are mostly distant memories in Strathclyde, you should check music licensing laws in any other markets you might be broadcasting to. Artists deserve to get paid if they still exist. I've got some station management procedures, which kind of like gives you the overall rounds here, which I think is pretty cool. I like how you got the start, define your remit items, draw 3 power and 4 staff, do your scavenging, do you burn power to broadcast? If not, you jump over to problems. If you do, so this like flow table here is really nice actually. It's real gaudy, but it's perfect. This also has custom setting advice for doing this in your hometown, which I think is really fun. I love that. It is apparently a fundamental constant of human nature that upon encountering a hell-blasted Moonscape RPG, players will ask, how can I do this to my hometown? With that in mind, here are a few guidelines for building a custom setting for Dead Air and living out your dreams as a force of godlike destruction. Dead Air takes place tens of years after a fundamental change in the structure of society. In the default setting, this is a nuclear war, but a global pandemic, a world-ending meteor impact, or an alien invasion would all be good stand-ins. The trick is to find something which interests and repulses you in equal measures. Then find relevant media to draw inspiration from. Dead Air draws deeply from the well of mid-20th century nuclear panic in the UK, such as Protect and Serve from 1974 and Threads in 1984. That acrid flavor permeates every decision I made about the setting. If, for example, we chose a global pandemic as a theme, maybe we could look at films such as The Andromeda Strain, 1971, which is one of my favorites. I love that movie. Or public information messages such as Coughs and Sneezes from 1945 for inspiration. Dead Air is a game about trying to follow complicated and archaic messaging, so the more eclectic the sources you can draw from, the better. The player should always feel at least a little bit out of their depth. Think about who's in charge in your setting. Is there a central government, like in the default setting? What are they like? It's important to set the flavor that the player is not in charge. It's important to the flavor that the player is not in charge. They must find themselves compelled to complete a remit which they have no control over and often barely understand. One final thought, when is your setting? The game works best at 50 to 100 years after the change, but a few days can be a very exciting way to play as well. Equally, hundreds of years could create bizarre and horrible new societies for you to talk to. Place. Playtesting has shown that the area covered by Strathclyde, roughly 150 square kilometers, is the best way to go. It's big enough to offer real difficulty and leave space for interesting cultural differences, but small enough to remain manageable and cohesive as a setting. Nothing is stopping you from going much bigger, such as a whole nation, or going smaller, like a prison, but the mechanics are written for this size. Roughly equivalent areas are Northern Ireland, Rhode Island, or Eswatini. Once you have your map, think about the settlements. Many of them will be ones that existed before the big change, but there should be new ones as well. There is sadly no exact science for placing your locations on the map, but a number between 8 to 12 is best. Make sure a few of them are out of the way and only feasible from a few transmitters. G and F are examples of this on the Strathclyde map, which is there and there. On that note, place your transmitters next. 5 is a good balanced number. Fewer than 4 or more than 7 makes the game very challenging and occasionally frustrating, but try it out if you like. Placing the transmitters is a little more structured than placing your settlements. Place it near the center for the player, and make sure there's a settlement touching the player's tower. That way they can always be heard on turn 1. Scatter the others around the map in such a way that every settlement would be covered if all stations broadcast at 2 power. Remember your out-of-the-way settlements. It can be a good idea to have them covered by only one station for a bit of difficulty. Assign the player the center band plan channel and shuffle the others randomly. You'll find that you end up with interference no matter what this way. If you have an even number of stations, add an empty channel so the player can still be centered. Finally, black zones. No more than 25% of the map should be covered for this game to remain fun. 3 settlements covered appears to be the magic number here. If you're changing the disaster, maybe black zones could be quarantine zones or regions with constant fuel shortages. For the remit, this might look like a difficult task, but most of the remit items are surprisingly setting agnostic. Simply change regional references such as Edinburgh no longer exists to ones relevant to you. You have a bit more work to do if you abandon the concept of nuclear annihilation. Fallout is spreading might become ghosts are coming. Alternatively, you can leave the entire list untouched to really freak out your listeners. Technology. This is a relatively painless one. Most of the technology from the base game can simply be reskinned for your setting, keeping the mechanics. For example, the Zadok system could become an emergency pager or a radio network news connection. Problems. The basic problems table doesn't need to be changed, especially wasps, the best thing in the whole game, but you might want to tweak some particulars in the critical tables. There are so many of these, 52 in total, that it might be better to just address the ones you want to change as they come up in play. News, you should write your own subject and noun columns to fit your setting. Think about topics you would speak to your friends about if you lived in your setting. I like the overall advice for the setting right here. It's great for just general world building with an apocalyptic setting. There's a custom settings checklist here that says settings, what went wrong and when, who's in charge now, and what are your flavor influences. Place, where are you? Place 8 to 12 settlements, 4 to 6 transmitters, and create black zones. Change any regional remit items and pieces of technology which no longer make sense, and then write up a subject and noun list for your setting news. Pretty straightforward. The map stuff is a little confusing to me just because I haven't played this. I think it would become more straightforward if I were doing a custom setting after having played Dead Air. Then it also shows a custom setting here that is based off of a global pandemic as the change. It shows the different settlements, some station ideas, and then it gets into the photocopiable area of the game. And finally, stay tuned and stay safe. So that was Dead Air, a game about radioactivity from Fiona Ruthven. I hope I'm pronouncing Fiona's name correctly. This was published in Strathclyde, Scotland. I imagine if Fiona read this, it would sound better than me reading it, just because I love the Scottish accent personally. But anyway, thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed this style of video. If you did, let me know in the comments below, and I will make time to do more of them. I have enjoyed doing this. I think it's kind of a fun way of reading and getting into a game that I've just not gotten to the table previously, and I hope you enjoyed kind of reading a game with me. If you'd like to support the channel, as always, you can hit subscribe, hit that little bell that sends notifications when a new video uploads. With February arriving here, I'm doing a lot of artwork as I'm finishing up some of my games, so I'll be posting some time-lapse videos of art. I'm also doing promo videos for Zine Quest, where I kind of do shout-outs for a couple of different projects that I find interesting as often as I can. I love this month. I love zines, I love indie RPGs like this, and this is like the best month except for I'm broke. Speaking of which, if you'd like to support the channel, I do have a couple of games that are in late pledges right now. I'm not running a game during Zine Quest, but I do have my Summer of Lovecraft game, which is a 1960s set Lovecraftian horror game based on the Mothership system, and that's available in late pledges. Or you could pick up Toonpunk, which is a game I drew and laid out for Alan Barr, and it's a kind of an old school dungeon crawling game with some attitude and some fun, funky colors in it. We just got done publishing a Kickstarter for the second book in that series, but you can also pick up the core game and the box set and all sorts of other cool stuff. I'll leave links to all of that below. And in the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon, and may you live in interesting times.